Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. We're here to discuss stream stitching, why the buzz, where it's working, and what's happening next. I'm Mike Green. I'm from Bright Cove. I look after marketing for our media business. And we've got a really great panel here to talk about this topic, a nice diversity of viewpoints from the publisher side, from the ad exchange, ad server side, from the other providers types sides. And Sean, you'll explain your side, unique as it is. So this should be a good discussion. Hope everyone's having a good Streaming Media West. I think we're being recorded. At the end, we're going to have some Q&A. So when we do that, please make sure you can ask into the microphone so that can be heard in the recording. And I think quickly just going to ask the panel to introduce themselves and who they are, where they are, what they're working on, and why this topic of stream stitching is a relevant one for them. So I think we'll start just with you, Sean.
Hi, morning. I'm Sean Doherty. I'm the CEO of Whirl. So our stream stitching server-side story really relates mostly to pay TV operators. We provide a streaming video network that pay TV operators use on their set-top boxes and in some cases on OTT devices to deliver made-for-digital programming to their subscribers. So we look like a cable or a broadcast network on these devices in the guides and VOD interfaces, but it's all streaming, totally IP-delivered content. The problem that we deal with on these set-top boxes is they're computers, and they're IP-connected, but they don't have a lot of the things that other IP-connected devices have, like frequently they don't have browsers, they don't allow cookies, they don't have persistent cache, all the building blocks of DAI on computers and mobile devices, these devices don't have. So it requires a server-side solution. You can't put a player on a pay TV operator's set-top box. So, in our search to cobble together solutions for this enormous market, we found Bright Cove and SpotX and some other providers that we use to integrate this totally cloud-based solution to deliver dynamic ad insertion for ad-supported programming on pay TV set-tops.
Great, thanks, Sean. Matt.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Matt Smith, Chief Evangelist for Envato. We are a video supply chain for broadcasters, programmers, really anyone who has any type of content that wants to get to screens of any shape and size. So we've taken the complexity out of modular approaches that have existed just recently in the past few years, where you had to pick a video encoder and an OVP or a video editing piece of technology, and really concatenated all that into one video supply chain. We power all 28 NBC Universal networks, Fox Sports, Telemundo, Univision, and probably about 200 stations nationwide. And that includes a topic we're going to touch here on this panel on, which is defeating ad blockers. We also can defeat ISIS. That's a checkable option.
Are we supposed to call them by a different name, though, to disempower them? No, it's true.
We're leading the jihad against ad blockers and ISIS. Anyway, looking forward to a lively discussion. Hopefully it's useful for you too.
My name is Jared Wolochinsky, and I apologize for my voice. I'm VP Monetization and Video Operations at CBS Interactive, and I oversee our full end-to-end advertising stack, so our vendor relationships, from actual playback, and then our monetization strategy, and obviously SSAI, which Alan and I have been working deep on with the IAB to make an official standard, and now is hopefully, not hopefully, it is going to become mainstream for a lot of the long form guys.
Thanks, Jared. Alan?
I'm Alan Dove. I'm the CTO at SpotX, and we are a supply-side platform, the dreaded SSP term, right? But what we are is a programmatic marketplace, and I think of it as an intelligence center for publishers to make the most of every ad opportunity, to include working on defeating ad blocking and using data and programmatic buying to make the most for every ad opportunity. And we have a real vested interest in this because I'm a big proponent of moving as much as possible server-side, just for no other reason than the end-user experience.
Well, so you guys did a great job of teeing up, I think, between the four of you, all the topics that we want to hit in the course of this conversation. Consumer experience, Alan, you just mentioned at the end, very critical in this topic. Ad blockers, which Matt mentioned, very critical. And IAB standardization, Jared, you mentioned that as well. So I think those are some of the main things we want to get to over the course of the discussion. This came about because Dan Rayburn actually was doing a catch-up on Bright Cove and was speaking to me about some of the different products and services that we offer our customer base. And he said, look, I think there's a lot of confusion around what he was saying is what we have as the name of the panel, stream stitching. He says that you guys have a stitching solution once, I understand what it does, but like there's a lot of intricacies, people don't understand that, they don't understand the term necessarily, and in the end we called the panel stream stitching because I think it may be more than SSAI. I'm not so sure, and I was actually going to ask Matt, can you come up with what your definition of stream stitching is and how does it relate to the other term we often use, server-side ad insertion?
Sure, it's a good place to start. And as you mentioned, stitching kind of gets confused with preparation for every screen, which is kind of part of that as well. It's table stakes, but what it means to me is offering the publisher, whoever's creating and delivering this content, the ability to replace content. So think of a sporting event that's allowed in a certain number of zip codes but not in others. So what happens when you don't have the rights to deliver that? Conversely, let's say you've got an OTT service, like pick one, PlayStation Vue, Go90, Sling TV, and you've negotiated for the rights to maybe air something on another business, in this case Dish, but you don't have the rights to stream Law & Order, for example, on Lifetime. So you've got a real problem, and you're faced with the notion of, do I put a slate up for 60 minutes, which is a horrible viewer and user experience, or do I stitch something in? I'm going to make a joke here, maybe the Andy Griffith Show, right? It's something they have rights to, or Miami Vice, or something. Pick a show. Ideally, it's something more modern, but they stitch that in real time. So it's content replacement, and then when you hit a break in that show, it's SSAI, it's server-side ad insertion, delivering different ads for the OTT version than you see in the broadcast. So those two things, I think, are the key elements of stream stitching.
And so for the publishers and service providers who are embracing this, what is the value proposition? Jared, let's start with you and then to Sean.
Dealing with client-side SDKs and moving things to and doing all this stuff in the client with Progressive or whatever, you deal with, every device is different. So, dealing with Roku versus Xbox versus PlayStation, when you start doing stream stitching, server-side ad insertion, we take that element of having to do a lot of the client work, it completely disappears. So our ability to scale and get on new devices quickly and to market is extremely important. There's a new device every other week, and we have to be there. CBS content, we want it everywhere that it can be possibly viewed. So, doing server side is the only way to be able to move fast. Then you also get the advantage of the hidden gem of getting around ad blockers to some extent. You have some pros and cons when you're doing server side when it comes to tracking and viewability, but obviously ad blockers can't get into the cloud and stop all that from happening. So, speed and the ad blocking are two important things.
So you hit two things in there. I think the device reach one being super important. A lot of devices aren't smart enough to do the client-side elements they might otherwise need. And then ad blockers. For you, Sean, ad blockers, not so much a problem on the set-top boxes that you're working with, but they are dumb devices. So
Yeah, no ad blockers yet on set-top boxes, though I'm sure they'll appear. Yeah, so it's the device issue for us. It's, stream stitching is sort of a way of normalizing and standardizing the stream that comes to pretty dumb devices, pay TV set-top boxes, so that they don't have to worry about any of that stuff, and so that there doesn't have to be any special technology, especially individual pieces of technology for individual content providers on the device. I mean, it's not these set-top boxes, it's not like a browser where a third-party player, Bright Cove, or someone's player can load, and that connects the dots. It just doesn't work that way. So these, the operators themselves, they're service providers, so they need to support what goes on these devices. It's another reason that they don't allow a lot of third-party software and special use cases to be on each of the devices. So it's really that kind of, it's almost like IP for video. It's this kind of normalization and standardization that stream stitching provides that makes this very popular with our customers.
And Alan, you were expressing your enthusiasm for it. It can't move fast enough for you to the cloud. What else do you, as someone who's sort of championing this, need to add to what the publishers themselves are saying about why this is an important development?
From my perspective, one of the large issues we have is the complexity, right, of the end user environment and the consumer environment. And, everything from you've got proliferation of VPAID and people say, you put a VPAID container out there and then it ends up opting out. So now you've got to figure out how to fall back to the next. And it becomes just an absolute abysmal experience for the end consumer. And not to mention that, all right, fine, if you're going to try and do a lot of complicated logic with video and interactivity in client on, say, my laptop, no problem. I plug my laptop in, the lights dim. My mom's machine, not so much. I can control all of that server side. I have a great deal, honestly, more intelligent server side than I can client side. And I think that we're seeing kind of the death throes of technologies that are relying on client side behaviors like cookies. And people are terrified of losing that visibility of cookies. But in our pervasive world, it's not the end all be all. So at the end of the day, I know CBS and company, they want the quickest and most efficient end user experience. And today, that's not the case.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably the most important thing that I didn't say is the benefits of server side is the user experience. With third party, with vast delivery and some of the standards we're working on the ad format guidelines, it's somewhat the Wild West in encoding standards and things like that for progressive files that are out there. I mean, it's scary that things break 5 to 10% of the time. You talk to the broadcast folks, they'd kill me if it was that high. They have zero tolerance for this stuff. It has to be TV-like, and I've heard it in other panels. Everything we do in millennials, they have an expectation. It just works like TV. And I think a lot of what we do dynamically, outside of server side, is counterproductive to that.
Yeah, and the other part to that too is that they're not working. If you were to look at, and we track a lot of these metrics for our publishers, if you look at abandonment or error rates in client, they are massive. And if you're able to reduce that even by a point, 2 points, the amount of revenue that publishers are missing out on, because this industry has been, in a lot of respects, very wild west and convoluted, it has to move server side because we're able to do more for a publisher for monetization in parallel server side than you can possibly client side.
So is that the case that needs to be made, that investment, minimal as it should be essentially to move server side, at least in a lot of use cases, is going to be worth it? There's going to be the ROI there, that the breakage will be down, the delivery will be up, the ad blockers will be beaten. Is that the case that's going to make this thing continue to grow?
I think so because you're putting a monetization component inside of a commodity framework that can't be tampered with to a great degree, right? And so you do, ad blocking, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Well, publisher's going to have to make a hard choice at some point here soon, which is I'm going to stream, and that's how I prevent ad blocking to a great degree, or I'm going to have to tell consumers, hey, you're blocking. If you want this content, you either figure out how to pay me for it or turn off your ad blocker.
It's an absolute. The answer to your question is no doubt about it, right? It's essentially you're pouring the foundation for the house. There's other things that are still going to change and things are going to improve over time. For example, if we're doing a mid-roll ad insertion, we don't know enough about the viewer themselves. We can target the viewer, but we still don't know enough about them in real time to make really smart ad decisions, right? And that's going to come. I mean, in addition to the IAB work that they mentioned, there's also another committee, the NAB Ad Tech Committee. We're meeting periodically and talking about these things, right? And there's different, just like this panel, there's people from different areas of the industry that are bringing their knowledge and experience to bear to create better standards so that we improve upon VPAID and are able to deliver relevant ads to people by age group, demographic, location, right? I mean, the ideal ad experience is you're watching something, a mid-roll pops up, a graphic pops up you can tap on, you save a coupon to your wallet or whatever Android calls it, and you go and redeem it at Starbucks, and you saved $1.50 off your coffee or something. That's a perfect ad experience. And those are coming.
So somewhat there, you're getting into like the hybrid component of having some client-side capabilities, in companion with the server-side stitching, so that people can take action. Why are you guys smiling so much? What's the story?
So that's in VAST 4.
It's
so that's
timely.
Yeah, it's perfect because that's exactly what we did with the new VAST standard is keeping the server-side ad insertion approach of here's my MES file, I'm going to transcode it, I'm going to have it for all these screens, and now we're going to do a lighter VPAID, without video. It's that interactive element that will layer on top of the server-side stitched environment, so you can get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and it's a a wonderful approach, because if you're thinking about transparency and then giving publishers control at the end of the day, it's extremely important, because when I give a vast stock back, and I'm going to give, you know, CBS or World or whomever a Mez file, and I follow along with, hey, here's the interactivity my advertiser would like to run. It's just like a companion banner today. You don't always get your companion's place. Matter of fact, well, I don't know what the stats are, so I won't quote it, but I would imagine it's not too high, right? But now it's up to you as a publisher to decide, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and let you lay in this light framework, JavaScript, inside, over top, and I'll synchronize it with the stream. Or I may not. And I just think that the advertisers will have to come around slowly to that, because it means a lot more revenue for all of us.
Yeah, I would just add, having distributed a lot of streaming services on a lot of different platforms, it's so much easier to move from platform to platform with doing everything server-side than having to worry about a lot of intellectual property and software that you've deployed on a single platform that has its own idiosyncrasies, its own SDK. I mean, this is, it's like I said before, it's like IP. You can just sort of swing this to whatever platform you want. There's a little bit of integration work, but it's way easier to get to multiple platforms with server-side technology.
Do you think Whirl has a different set of advertisers, given that people aren't expecting the client-side interactivity of clicking through to purchase on a set-top box? In the pay TV ecosystem, that's not how ads typically are consumed today anyway, right? So that's...
Yeah, I'm sure we do. I mean, SpotX would probably know more about that with their connected device practice, but yeah, I mean, there's telescoping ads and things like that are sort of early days on TV platforms, and more traditional TV-style advertising is, there's a huge market for it, and we sort of stick with the tried and true.
And I do think that as the technology has become more pervasive, and you've got, in Europe, you've got HBBTV and those kind of protocols that are out there, I think that the natural evolution of interactivity with advertising, it's just going to happen inside those clients. And I think that what ends up happening is the protocols like VAST or request protocols will begin to evolve to support that as more of a norm than it is us trying to push that forward as an advertising industry. And the demand will follow. And I think that there is some confusion on the demand side now but you have that today. I'm going to serve an MP4 or whatever it might be out into a mobile device, and then the beacons will get fired to you, et cetera. And advertisers get a little confused because they think of their VPay containers. That'll change. And it's up to us, I think, to educate and show what the better experience ends up being.
Yeah, I mean, advertisers that are coming from the web world have realized all these benefits with client-side technologies, that they get lots of information and cookies and all these things. With less intelligent devices, let's just say, or coming from advertisers that are coming from a linear TV world, this is like the Wild West. It's like brand new demographic information and feedback and completions and all these things that they can now get that they were never able to get before. So we're, I guess to answer your question from before, it's very traditional advertising, but with better data that we're able to deliver through this technology.
So I'd love to come back to the advertiser viewpoint that you're getting into a little bit, Alan, in a second. But I guess before we do that, I guess, Matt, where does the reception of the technology stand with publishers today? Are they, like, we're expressing all these benefits, certainly, and you're out with your solutions talking about why you should be doing this, but where is the resistance today, and if, is it valid?
I would say it's not really resistance. It's how valuable a CPM model can the publisher drive. So, a big brand like NBC Universal and all the brands underneath that, or a Fox Sports, these guys are going to demand, the highest rates for the ads that they deliver on their platform and their apps, wherever the use case is. The real challenge is for the broadcast market. So we have 200 plus TV stations nationwide, and the guys in New York and LA, Chicago, even down to Baltimore are, seeing CPMs north of 20, which is great, which is where you want to be. The real wrinkle is for the guy in Tyler, Texas, right, where they're not, frankly, I don't think there's a platform on the planet that's really going to throw $20 CPM at these guys. So they're having to get creative. So it's not necessarily resistance. It's just a challenge. It's a hurdle. How do they use this technology to drive revenue for their brand and for these new digital offerings. And I've got one customer who is in Tyler, Texas, and they go out to the local Chevy dealer and have them, at whatever rate makes sense for them, sponsor all the ad breaks in their local news content. And they put up a slate with his information, the branding, so it's effectively like an ad. It can't be blocked, and they're making revenue off that. That's really the challenge that we see, because with content, ultimately it's a hits-driven world. We hear this all the time, right? So if you've got good content, people will watch it, and you can drive revenue around it. So but then, again, relative to my previous comments, it's relative to the size of the market, the size of the publisher, the size of the audience.
So, Alan, on your earlier point about, I guess you are the closest thing we have to the demand side here because you've got all the buyers in the SpotX marketplace. How are they feeling about SSAI, and how great of a concern are some of the things that you guys are working through with the VAST 4.0 spec and other things that the IAB is doing to mitigate their concerns?
Well, I don't know that the IAB necessarily, the specs mitigate their concerns, right? I think that they're...
It gets into viewability and stuff like that eventually.
Well,
which
it gets to viewability, which seems to be suddenly the currency du jour, right? And then viewability will become something else, So I think that the IAB has done a good job of trying to keep up and maybe get ahead in some respects of those pieces. But the demand side, it's like everything else. 3 years ago, if we're having this conversation, what's happening on the demand side? They're giving to agencies and say, spend $1 million. Don't care, just spend $1 million. Now suddenly, 3 years into it, they're realizing all this data that we have and that we can leverage and that we should be leveraging and they should be leveraging. And so I think that our responsibility is going to be to educate the demand side. If you allow stitching, we can guarantee you better performance in many cases. We can guarantee you an uninterrupted experience for your brand, and it's not so far diverged of your current V-paid containers. I mean, I remember 2 summers ago having a conversation with a large brand about, no, we have to have M-rate for video on mobile. And I remember saying to them, well, how about we look at maybe V-paid 2.0 or something else, or let me just send your creative straight down the pike. No. Literally 4 months later, like, well, how about VPaid 2.0 and let's forget M-rate? Because they begin to get educated. So it'll come. It'll be slow.
Is that conversation also going to help get rid of all the Flash creatives to make this a better world in that way?
I hope so. I think Google and Firefox and those guys are going to do what they can to make that happen. And then you've got AMP being the AMP framework from Google, et cetera. Will that take off in its current form? Probably not, but it's a great step forward.
So, Jared, you have a very young, on some of your properties, a young, coveted male audience who can be aggressive with things like ad blocking technology. So that's definitely one of the rationales you have for going at things from a server-side perspective. Can you talk through the thought process there? Any data you want to share about how you've thought about that? I know, not everybody loves to claim, we've got ad blockers in use on some of our properties by some of our audience, but I mean, the idea for advertisers is like they're not getting charged if the ad got blocked anyway, so.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. There's a number of different properties and different approaches we take at CBS Interactive, on the gaming kind of sites, things like that, which are younger males, especially tech savvy, ad blocking, percentages domestically and international are going to be higher than something like CBS News or CBS Sports. So, the approach of, since we've had the experience in server side for years, and the advantages from just the user experience, and it's like, well, you can just do the same thing for this. You kind of remove the element that can get blocked from the browser, and it's all done on the server. So you still get your tracking, you still get playback. You might even get a better user experience sometimes when you're doing server side on desktop with ad blocking. So. Numbers-wise, it's meaningful. I'll leave it at that on those kind of sites, and it's definitely one of many approaches we're taking. Where something else like CBS.com, and this comes into the power of the content, where server side, like I said, has its pros and cons when it comes to tracking and cookies and things along those lines. So Big Bang Theory, You want to watch a full episode? Well, there's not really many places for you to get it. So on CBS, we might take a different approach. On on GameSpot, it might be the server side. On somewhere else, we're just measuring right now and learning. And I think that's the big thing is we're in the, we've been, I don't want to say battling, but we've been thinking about ad blockers for close to 3 years now. This isn't new for us, but it is, really getting into getting further into the measurement stage and understanding our different options and doing a lot of A/B testing to make decisions with data instead of just saying, well, screw it, we're going to block everything.
Do you have something to add to that, Matt?
I was just going to say that I think we're all advocating that server side ad replacement content stitching makes sense. It is a way to defeat ad blockers today, but I don't want anyone to think that any of us, and certainly not me, are saying we've got this problem solved, close the book, we're done. We're done here. Frankly, it's going to be a game of whack-a-mole I'll liken it to keeping up with digital rights management, right? Someone will crack it at some point, and you've got to patch it and you've got to fix it. This isn't to say that those who don't make the software that block these ads are going to figure out how to more efficiently sniff through an M3U8 playlist and see a discontinuity tag. Some of those things can be mitigated today by encrypting elements, but it's still going to be a work in progress. I mean, we are able to solve this problem. It's not the boogeyman. It's not Michael Myers with a knife in his hand. We know how to solve the problem today, but it is going to be an ongoing thing. It's like I say, it's going to be a game of whack-a-mole.
Do you feel like the iOS 9 content blocking has really elevated the discussion in the last few months?
I think that started it. I mean, I forget which one of you guys said it, but you said it at CBS that this has been a topic of discussion from
3 years.
From infrastructure, from vendors and publishers for 3 years. I mean, we've been doing ad blocking for some of our customers for the better part of 2.5 years. But you're right. I mean, recently it's become this topic of discussion. Like, we're all going to die. The sky's falling, right? Yeah. And we figured this out. It's been in practice for a long time. But to your point, maybe that was it. Given that iOS 9 introduced that as a feature in an OS, and everyone was like, "Oh, what's this? Oh, cool! I don't see ads anymore." Maybe.
Right. Well, that's right. I would say it has opened up the rhetoric and has brought a lot of press and stuff around that lately. That's the big thing with iOS 9. It's called content blocking. It's not called ad blocking, and it breaks a lot of stuff that isn't even ad related. It's a blunt instrument. And I'm not sure what the current downloads are of the apps that you have to pay for on top of it anyway for it to work. So, I mean, I think it's obviously, it's a message as to why people are even doing it is, from a publishing standpoint, I think, I wouldn't say CBS has done it, but, in general, this is where the lean initiative comes in from the IAB. And there's definitely, we're at fault as well. I don't want to say we've gotten greedy, but it's gotten NASCAR-ish. There's autoplay. There's, automatic stuff that opens up the App Store. It drives me crazy as a user. I can understand why someone installs, content blocking or an ad blocker on desktop.
Jared, can you actually explain that acronym LEAN that you just
Yes.
used, and then can you somewhat segue into the work you guys are doing with the IAB in general to sort of stand out?
I did. It's light, encrypted, ad choice, non-invasive. So light, it's not 100 meg 30-second file. It's something that it executes quickly. Encrypted, SSL is a hot topic and making sure things are secure. Ad choice, so being able to opt out from tracking and do not track lists and people respecting that. And then non-invasive, it's the not autoplay below the fold with audio. You can't find it. It's the full screen interstitials on a mobile web that doesn't have a close button. It's things along those lines.
And those being general practices for good user experiences, not specific to the SSAI stuff that we're talking about.
Correct. This is for everything.
Yeah, sure,
Anything ad-related, video, mobile display, native, anything we do advertisement-wise.
Right.
At the end of the day, if we break the user experience and they stop coming, then what's the point?
But a quick point, though, from a user experience, and you touched on some very good points. This was an area that needed help, right? But it's essentially ad blocking is applying penicillin to kill everything, in your intestines. But everyone's had that experience where you've been searching for a vacation or a particular set of fins or a mask to go snorkeling or something or diving, and then after you've bought it, you notice for the next 5 to 7 days you're like seeing all these display ads for snorkels and scuba vacations and stuff like that, and it feels a little creepy, right? So this was a problem that needed to be addressed, but again, ad and content blockers are kind of like the penicillin solution, so we've had to find workarounds.
But I think that even part of that too is it's in some respects the industry's fault too that we've even had to come up with this concept of lean, right? Because when you think about how VPaid, what the intention of VPaid was, and now what VPaid has become, I know that we've had some clients who will end up with 18, 20 seconds that these VPay containers are calling each other and trading each other and brokering each other, and they're all opting out at the end of the day. And it's because they're all cookie hunting. So then you start to think about lean and you think about privacy and opting out or control. The idea, as I see it, is we have to push more control back to the publisher to control their experience. It's up to folks like me and Worlds and everybody up here to say, you know what, I'm going to give you the data to enable you to make the money with it. And as a consumer, I mean, I don't know how many of you, if you ever turn on and ask for, clear all your cookies and say, I want you to ask me every time someone wants to issue a third-party cookie. Just load a site. You'll be there for 40 minutes, accept, because everybody's doing server-side or client-side, cookie syncing. And those are just, it's an abysmal experience, and it's not needed anymore.
So being conscientious of our time, I want to let you guys get into a little bit of what's being done to standardize the approach to SSAI, what the VAST 4.0 spec means, what the promise is of it.
Yeah.
What do people in this room need to know about that?
So, I mean, keeping it short, the big elements of VAST 4 and as it relates to SSAI is the introduction of requiring a TV quality MES file. So, SSAI, things are downloaded dynamically when a VAST response is received. They're transcoded into the God knows how many profiles for every other device. So starting from the highest quality asset and then encoding down, obviously it's kind of stuff I think everyone in this room probably understands. So it's officially putting that in the spec. Even though VAST 3 and VAST 2, we all do it today and we just take the highest bit rate, but now it's including that MES file. And then the key for doing the mapping between the download and the asset, and it's the introduction of the universal ad ID. So in the US, most common one is the ad ID guys, which is ATV. It's just what it is. It's the old ISKI code kind of mentality where the same ID from CBS to Fox to ABC to wherever, it's a universal ID. It's one, and it's unique to that one piece of creative. So it's to be able to match the MES file that was downloaded to that key, which has all kinds of metadata associated with it. And then the last piece of it is the light VPaid, so being able to do server-side ad insertion with that MES file and then layering in the interactive elements or verification or viewability on top of it.
Yeah, and then there's one other piece that kind of is a subtle piece to VAST, and it's policy is nothing without enforcement, right? Which is the VPaid opt-out. When you return, the idea is you give a flag whether or not the VPaid is going to be conditional. And so you as a publisher now can decide, oh, you're conditional, I'm out. And so now you've actually got a stick to swing it at advertisers or advertising brokers, those middlemen. As a publisher, you didn't say you were going to opt out, but you are. So you're out.
One other thing I'd add too that's not specific to VAST 4, but it was a change we saw from VAST 2 to VAST 3. And actually, I still see a handful of publishers out there who still have VAST 2. So there's one thing I can encourage you all to do is look at your ad strategy as it relates to the VAST spec and update as much as you can. For broadcasters and the folks that we service, the key change in that 2 to 3 spec was the delineation between local and national payload in a break. So some of our customers say we want the national ads that were sold by one sales team to persist across all platforms. So your Coke and your Crest toothpaste and your Ford ad will play OTT as well as on broadcast. But then regionally, we can say give the last 90 seconds of that break back to a local or regional ad play so that the ads are different, say, for Ford in the Southwest than it would be in the Southeast and the Northeast. So that was a key delineator, and I'm assuming it's still persistent in the VAST 4 spec. So that ability to either replace the entire break or give or keep national and give local or regional ads to the appropriate people was a very key piece for broadcast.
So you tee up perfectly what I think is going to be the last question I'll ask, and then if people have thought of good questions in the room, we'll encourage you to come up and ask them, or if you ask them, I can repeat them, I guess, if we don't have a mic wandering. Sean, I know this is dear to your heart, and I would, I guess, love everybody on the panel to give their opinion on this. To do, as Matt just described, all the things that are necessary in order to maximize yield and ensure the success of SSAI, how or which different elements in this sort of chain need to work together successfully?
Sort of, so prioritizing these things, or?
There's a lot of people involved in SSAI,
Yeah.
you know, from the publisher to the advertiser to the ad server to the client devices that you work with. Like,
Yeah.
you know, where's the greatest pain to making these things work seamlessly together and make this thing more successful?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer your question. The greatest pain is making these things work seamlessly together. It's not any individual piece. It is the integration that's the challenge, I think.
So Matt was getting into, for example, all the parameters that we're used to passing in a standard VAS call from the player to the ad server, returns what it's supposed to, nothing is dropped, all the geo or data that's needed to target well ensures, like, you know, good quality targeted ads come back. You know, in different environments it gets trickier, different platforms
Yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah. So, you know, the standards work that they're doing is critical, I think, to this. Standards for each of these pieces that need to be integrated to make the whole ecosystem work. So, you know, I'm happy to hear about that. The more of that, the better.
Matt, or anyone else who's welcome to?
You know, one thing I would say is, mentioned this earlier, is the targeting piece. You know, as technologists and as infrastructure providers, you know, we say, well, the house is built. Why isn't anyone living in it yet? So we're seeing, you know, we do see some regional ads and some national ads in a mid-roll break. But I haven't yet really seen anyone say, I'm going to target this user that's this demographic, this, you know, male in this zip code in Midtown Manhattan with an ad. I haven't seen that. Maybe it's coming, and I don't know if there's a disconnect between, you know, the ad space, and I'll use a very generic term there, and, you know, the publisher and the technology space.
Well, so that's actually a big piece of programmatic buying, right, which is something we specialize in. And one of the disconnects, and it's been probably, Jared's heard me probably jump up and down and throw a tantrum about in the IAB calls, but VAST it was a response-only protocol. And what's missing to sort of pair VAST is a request protocol, too. Now, OpenRTB is used, I mean, OpenRTB probably transacts more business today than anything else. And it's billions and billions and billions of transaction impression opportunities a day, including display. So OpenRTB has all those things, right? And so what we need to be able to bring is something that doesn't necessarily have to be bidding. It can be just for deals. I've struck a deal with you, but I'm going to make sure that I'm getting all that intel passed in at ad call time from the Bright Cove player, and I know that I can trust those things. That's why people want to be up in client more and more.
Well, you know, so that type of stuff is what I think is, I mean, they're the bigger customers. I mean, for Bright Cove, our big broadcast customers have deep teams, have ad ops expertise, and truthfully aren't doing too much, certainly not in open exchanges, right? They're pretty well sold out with premium advertising. I'm sure this is largely the case for most of your properties, Jared. So some of those things that you're getting into, Alan, haven't come to be as painful as they potentially could be if somebody was doing all open exchange.
Or as lucrative. You know, so there's a close correlation between financial opportunity and technology development. These next 12 months with political campaigns going on are going to drive a lot of people to get really interested in the kind of very micro-targeting and the data that can be made available through these systems.
Yeah. And that's one big initiative that we have at CBS Interactive lately, you know, around video or even display is, you know, we have a lot of first-party data that we use, and even to your example of, you know, being in Midtown, we know you're a male, be like, you know, CBS All Access, which is a subscriber product, you know, when you register, we know your age, we know your gender, you know, we are geo-targeting in that unit, so that, you know, I think when you start getting down to zips and these other things, you know, you get into the tip of the pyramid, and, you know, your scale starts becoming the challenge for part of the opportunity. But a lot of that is doable today, and we do it, you know, and we're really starting to really productize it, you know, but more around, you know, especially our first-party data that we have, you know, across the entire portfolio, you know, from registration to consumption, since we cover, you know, sports, news, tech, entertainment, music, and then even all the third-party syndicated data that's available, and mixing and matching and building that recipe. And I think that really is the next step in the game of, it's, you know, brand plus. It's, you know, you can't lose fact of you need branding, you need the more overarching reach, but you can also get to the tip of the pyramid. You could get that in-market auto, that in-market telco.
Great. So how about in the room here? Any questions that you guys have for the experts on the topic of server-side ad insertion stream stitching? There's a mic in the back, so put your hand up. If not, I can throw some more. Oh, we got one right in the front here. Sorry, Mike headed your way, actually. One sec.
This is really for Jared and Alan. How close are we to where if an advertiser wants to come and do a multi-platform campaign, how closely stitched is like the SSP platform to the traffic and billing for over the air? That's part one. And when do you think that programmatic TV will actually take off as a result?
Go first. So, multi-platform, and you're including live linear TV. I think we got a ways to go on that one. Just there's a lot of legacy systems that weren't built for VAST and these kind of things. So a single line going across every single platform. I think we got a ways out. That's not to say that the interactive and network and teams are working together and go in as one. But from a technology standpoint, I still think we got a ways to go before we get there. And it even comes down to what we do digitally doesn't have 0% tolerance for fail. I mean, it's like it breaks more than any live linear broadcaster would ever tolerate.
Yeah, and so there's a number of things and partnerships we have that we're working specifically on that, right, which is programmatic television, terrestrial programmatic, as I like to think of it. And part of the difference in that space is the delivery vehicle. Like Jared just said, it can never break. And the other part that you have is like where I grew up in northern Maryland, you've got still set-top boxes that are addressable in the sense that I can send you something. That's all I know about you, right? So bringing that programmatic vehicle there, it's really about trying to get into the higher order addressable devices in the homes, and then how do you blend? So you've got the broadcast signal coming down, and then how do you bump into a device that synchronizes with that to overlay?
So today, basically, your analytics and your pricing structure are separate processes.
Our analytics and pricing structure, separate processes. For that, yeah.
Yeah, they're not separate from our perspective, right? Because we transact the deal programmatically, even if it's a deal that you've done with an advertiser, et cetera. We still compete all those things in a market, and you'll have guaranteed delivery, et cetera, but we're able to, with the analytics, decide, well, okay, this deal is pacing great. Now, I know that I should probably send this here, but I can make more money from something else right now for you. Mm-hmm. So they're not separate in the respect, but with terrestrial, you have one issue that sometimes advertisers might stumble on. I don't know when I'm going to get feedback on what actually served and played and how much.
Right.
It's delayed. It's okay. I can deal with that, but now I think it becomes the education of the industry.
I think the challenge with having any kind of recipe that's going to work everywhere is that as you add more endpoints, the way that you get data back or the ability to execute the same thing is decreased. And at least from Brightcove's perspective, one of the things that we've thought about is having a player that we built, which is a great player standalone, but it also understands the server-side ad insertion service well enough to make sure that whatever you're trying to do will work if it's as you intend in a number of endpoints. It's interesting because some of the ad serving tech companies have their own stitching services, but players kind of read what's going on there differently. So I mean, Envato, you guys have like end-to-end with your own kind of way to read what you're doing upstream as well. So it just doesn't work the same way as on TV and as on a set-top box VOD menu and everywhere else that someone might try and unify a way of serving a campaign.
Just one other comment. The other thing with linear TV is the minutes of viewing of video are moving so quickly toward IP delivered and away from QAM, linear, traditional delivered TV. It may be that we arrive at a solution that's an all IP solution quicker than we can get programmatic working on traditional linear.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it doesn't have to be an all IP solution. I think we're going to have to get more intelligence in the devices that are in the home, right? And because once you have the intelligence on the client, whether it's player, however you want to call it, right, that's where the intelligence becomes, and you're able to deliver what VAST 4.0 is going to try to deliver in the sense of stitching, and now I can have the interactivity or other intelligence playing alongside with it, coordinated.
Other questions in the room? One right here, please.
Disney. Who's sort of working on the standards element of this work that you're referring to? Because I mean, I'll recap what I said just in case no one heard me. So coming from cable, we do this for DAI anyways, right? This is how we get ads in place. I think we're moving to where a lot of these folks are coming from in terms of doing ads that are presented differently, right? Like, you know, from within our own network, but maybe not stitched into the video stream. So who's sort of leading these activities in terms of standardization for doing the ad stitching?
You mean on cable in particular?
No, I'm referring to the over-the-top play.
Oh.
So, because we have SCT35 to do the ad markers if you're using MPEG-2 transport stream, and a lot of the folks going to Dash are not using that same method, and there's sort of like a gap in that space right now. So I'm just curious that who.
So we're still using a lot of the same methodology that applies in television and cable. We're still using SCTI 104 markers, SCTI 35 markers, depending on the flavor of the video, to condition and to mark the presence of those breaks. But then in terms of standardization and how it's handled, I think, is it fair to say it's a combination of the IAB and maybe this, like I said, there's an NAB ad tech committee. I think there's a couple of working groups. I don't think there's one overarching authority who's saying you must do it this way. And maybe we need that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the delivery vehicle is separate in my mind from the infrastructure vehicle of, say, programmatic buying or, you know, deal delivery. And what I mean is so you think of how you deliver ads to your set-top boxes today, right? It tends to be in the older boxes the one-way communication piece. And I don't, you know, I've always said I don't care if it's a space shuttle in the old days, right? I can tell me how to talk to the space shuttle, I'll get an ad to it, right?
Right.
And so from that perspective, I think the standards that are in place today can apply in terms of transmitting or communicating information about what's to be delivered. It's then the delivery mechanism that becomes specific in that terrestrial world. It's different today.
Right. Okay. And do you think that there's entirely a huge advantage to using content processing to stitch the ad in as opposed to using manifest manipulation at the edge to be able to repoint to specific segments that for any you know hacker that's trying to avoid displaying ads and create a piece of software to do that really can't surmise because he doesn't know what these sort of dynamic URIs that are being presented within the manifest.
I mean, if I think about it, I'm a keep it simple, stupid guy.
Right.
And so if you're just streaming bits and I can't easily on the client put something that's promiscuous, understand what's going to be streamed next, et cetera, and you're controlling that server side, to me that's an advantage for a broadcaster or a publisher, right? Because then I'm not relying on something that can be sniffed out client side.
Right.
Now, would someone begin to use, okay, we want to lay interactivity over top of that? Well, of course, now people are going to start looking at that and trying to figure out what to do, and it becomes an inexact science, and I think that will end up making potentially user experience worse, so maybe it becomes a death knell for that industry, I don't know.
Okay. And I guess I'll pad a third question in here. So do you see that there being sort of, I don't know, maybe a point of critical mass when you get into very personalized ads, individualized ads that require you to basically manipulate video on a personal basis across, you know, hundreds of thousands, perhaps, you know, more streams, right? You can pass that question off if you want.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that that's what we do every day, right? So
Right.
that from a scale perspective, that's, you know, wheelhouse. But what becomes unique is, I was going to bring up the point earlier of today, everyone thinks about video and stitching as long form, but what happens when it's live? And how do you deal with 100,000, 500,000, a million uniques all at the same time? Well, there's ways we've all lived with in our world to do that. And then the delivery of those uniquely to the devices, if it's IP connected, a lot easier, right? If it's not IP connected, if it's, you know, some of the older set-top technologies, well, it gets a little more difficult, especially in a live scenario.
True.
But in the meantime, some people ask whether they even want to do dynamically swapping out ads during the live stream. If they can get the proper Nielsen measurement, then it may be more to their benefit to accumulate ratings.
Right. Well, I mean, even an example of that is on Saturday night, you know, we had the Democratic debate, and on live linear, you know, that was, you know, traditional stuff, nothing, you know, it's kind of what they do, but on CBSN, our digital channel, we had simulcast coverage, but it was differentiated, and we did that 100% dynamic, and preparing our vendors and especially their ad vendors to be prepared for, hey, you might get 500,000 calls within a second, so be ready for it. We actually took a step back and took more control of trying to just do it all in-house and not trying to work with every different ad vendor out there and being like, you need to be prepared, because honestly, a lot of them can't do it, and it fails. And I think the number one thing we all talk about, it's got to work. So I think we take a lot of that risk out for now on the big live streaming events that have a lot of concurrence.
And the reality is, and this is, okay, I'm going to get on a soapbox, my own personal belief here, but my thought of slot bidding or the Super Bowl halftime ad bidding, it happens months ahead of time. Will that ever come into our world? I hope so. The reality is that we're going to have to come up with mechanisms for doing prefetching or whatever it might be, so that things can't break, or it might be delivery well ahead of time. So the CBSs can absolutely control that experience, but you've still allowed the programmatic marketplace to make you a lot of money in those cases for those live events.
Prefetching is going to be key. That's got to be
It has to happen.
best practice. Going forward, we're going to have to prefetch these ads so they can be delivered
Yeah.
and individualized.
As soon as you come out of the last break, the first thing you're doing is going to get the next break's worth of ads, or next 2 breaks worth of ads. Not
And
a
again,
hard
with,
concept.
with a lot of premium broadcasters, certainly, there's a known universe of creatives, and they can all be preconditioned and stuff so that you don't have the issue so much. Let's throw one more question if there is anybody else in the audience. One more question before we wrap up? No? Okay. Anil, do you have a question? Oh, Anil Jain with a question.
Just say insider, not fair.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
news to
This
me.
is not a plan,
I hope it's not
honestly.
for me, but
Yeah. I won't put Mike on the spot. We talked earlier about the consumer experience, and all of you kind of highlighted, and of course that's key for whatever content delivery and ad streaming technology, independent of stream stitching, right? But when it comes to SSAI and server-side ad insertion, I'm curious, and I guess Jared, I'll start with you, and then you can kind of pass it on. What have you guys seen when you get past desktop and predominantly you look at mobile? There are other devices as well. What have you seen in terms of breakage or leakage, in terms of ad delivery, latency, timeouts, et cetera, and how is that addressed?
Yeah,
through-
so especially on VOD, where we are prefetching the entire episode before you even see that first frame of playback. So you hit play, all ads have been decisioned, they've been prefetched, they've been stitched to content, and off you go. God knows how many times I have to sit on AC Transit in San Francisco, going from San Francisco to Alameda, and I'm like, I'm gonna watch Colbert, I'm gonna watch a show. Especially since we moved to server side, the buffering and doing the progressive stuff that we constantly battle with errors is gone. I mean, this is smooth playback, especially when you get onto the cell phone dead spot on the bridge. When I drop down the one bar, it's important for me to keep going and my quality reduce versus me get stuck. I know how many times I'd be like, all right, if I'm stuck for 5 seconds, I'm done, I'm out. And and keeping people, and we've seen stats from folks like Conviva and stuff like that. 1% of buffering leads to 11 minutes of lost user content. That's huge when you're talking about a 22-minute show or a 42-minute show. Now it's just 1%. And I know we've all probably have experienced it where that thing just goes and you're gone, and sometimes like I'm never going back. It's just because I know it's gonna suck.
Well, listen, as we go to wrap up here, I want to say, actually, before I forget, I see, so Stu Barnes from my team sitting in the front here. We're going to post a white paper later this week about this topic, and just decided to print up at least a few of them in the meantime. So if this topic is of interest to you, I assume maybe it is because you came to hang out with us for 45 minutes. Stu here in the front has a number of copies of a white paper about server-side ad insertion and data about why it's helpful. So you can see him, or it's going to be at brightcove.com/ad blockers. We picked ad blockers because it's not what we're doing, it's just the hottest word that people care about when they want to learn about this stuff. So there you go, brightcove.com/ad blockers. I want to say thanks to Alan, Jared, Matt, Sean. Thank you guys very much for spending the time sharing your insights here. I'm sure people can stick around a second and answer any more personal questions. So thank you.